Welcome to Fundraising Leaders with Drew, where we embark on a journey to discover the heart and soul of nonprofit fundraising. I'm your host, Drew Clancy, and today I am grateful to be joined by Greg Warner. Greg is the CEO and founder of MarketSmart and the author of the book Engagement Fundraising. Check that out. Great read. MarketSmart helps fundraisers focus on the donors most likely to support their organizations with major and legacy gifts. Let's jump right in with Greg. Greg, thanks so much for joining us today. Really looking forward to our conversation. So let's jump in. What inspired you to start MarketSmart way back in 2007?
Yeah, well, I always wanted to own my own ad agency. So I worked for ad agencies. I worked in direct response. I worked for a printing company, magazine, Washingtonian magazine here locally, a newspaper here locally in the DC area. But what's interesting is sometimes everything you think you want isn't what you really need. And so I started the business as a marketing agency and a marketing automation or HubSpot reseller.
Sure.
Back when they were early, a new company. And I really loved the idea of marketing automation emails and monitoring metrics. But about 3-4 years into it, as I made more money, I was happy and making more money and having a good old time making money, but I wasn't actually happy with that kind of business. High pressure, deadline oriented, very intense. And if the marketing didn't work, even if it's because the customer told you to do it a certain way, it was my fault. So that's what inspired me to start MarketSmart. But then I kind of hit a pivot point where I decided to change the business and start helping charities, which that decision happened in 2011 after I helped charities using my marketing business, but for free. So it wasn't until 2011 that I was deciding maybe this is not the business I want to be in, the old traditional business, and maybe I want to invent something new to fill a gap in the nonprofit market that just didn't exist.
Love it. Let's talk a little bit about your philosophy. You've written a book, Engagement Fundraising. Tell me a little bit about how does your approach differ from sort of traditional fundraising?
Well, that's a big question, but I'll try and be succinct. Is that as I began to understand fundraising as it stood, and as people were telling me the way that it worked back in 2008, 2009, especially when I was helping charities for free, the people that I worked for free were constantly bringing up what I'll call myths and traditions and orthodoxies, saying, this is the way it's done. You don't understand. This is the way it's done. And
Sure.
You should read this book and you should read that book. And so I got all these books, the Penelope Burke donor-centered fundraising, all those surveys, and relationship fundraising. And, there's all these words in front of the word fundraising. There's this donor-centered fundraising, the relationship fundraising, and so on and so forth. And I don't want to knock those because they're great books and they were very informative.
Sure.
But they were also a little bit dated. And what I was experiencing as a donor, it did not correlate to the way I was feeling. And I kept saying to myself, it's not about the relationship. Like the person that I know over at the university I went to, like no offense, but I don't really have a relationship with that person. I don't go to the movies with them. I don't want to go to the movies with them. Like I I want them to facilitate my giving, and I
Sure.
want them to be trustworthy, but I don't want a relationship. Now some donors do, but I what kept coming to mind for me was it's not about the relationship. It needs a foundation of trust. So it's about trust, but not the relationship the way that many are led to believe. It's really about engagement. Are people engaged or are they not? If you build trust, they'll lean in and they'll become more engaged. If you provide them with value, which is actually, and offers, which is the terms that I know as a marketer, but aren't talked about that much in those old fundraising books.
Sure. Sure. Sure.
So I looked at it and I was like, there's a value equation in here because any exchange of money requires an exchange of value. But the value that donors get is, especially major donors, is often misunderstood by fundraisers that are inexperienced. The most experienced and the smart ones, they really know, and the great leaders in the business know. But too often there's too many myths and orthodoxies and transactionality, over solicitation,
Right.
and just there's a lot of bunk out there that's not really from the donor's perspective, but more so from a direct response perspective, which can be like, well, if 94 out of 100 people don't respond, that's okay because 6 did. And it's that mentality, especially in the major gifts realm, doesn't work. You can't burn bridges with 96 people so that you can find 4 or 94 to get 6.
Greg, what does work? What do you think? What are the key elements that fundraisers should be focusing on or thinking about as they engage with major gift prospects?
So without becoming redundant about engagement, um, engagement does matter. So I'll try and stay out of that rabbit hole for now. Maybe we'll hit it later.
Sure.
Engagement matters. Engagement happens though when people feel that trust and value. So there's a promise of value that is then satisfied and people feel they can trust an organization or an individual.
Sure.
So trust is paramount. That's the foundational, that's the cornerstone in the foundation of all fundraising. And without it, really nothing can happen, especially in the major donor realm. The value, getting to value, and trust is part of the value equation, is recognizing that every person has a fulcrum. You know, the fulcrum is in the middle of the seesaw where they're balancing in their brain, whether they do it consciously or subconsciously, they're balancing the value they get in return for their money or engagement or the advice they give in filling out a survey or whatever.
Sure.
So the idea is to make sure that you understand that each donor has a seesaw and a fulcrum, and they're considering the value that they get out of the engagement with your cause. And if you stay attuned to that consistently, then you recognize that you're a value provider as a fundraiser and as a fundraising operation. That means that your job is to remove friction from the consideration process in order to
Right.
deliver value in as seamlessly a way as possible. Now, there's more, but I want to pause for a second because I figure you might have more questions.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Um, I love that, by the way. Great model. Um, One of the things that you write about, is the fundraising report card. And I believe this is available at fundraisingreportcard.com. Um, Tell us a little bit about that. I mean, that obviously report card, we're looking at metrics. How does all that kind of play upon this idea of engagement fundraising?
Yeah, that's interesting. So it's maybe not what you might have thought, but I built the fundraising report card as a free application for nonprofits, institutions, organizations, staff, board members, consultants to use entirely for free. And going back on what I just talked about, it's our way of building trust among fundraisers and leaders in the field so that when they finally come to decide that they want to investigate MarketSmart and see if MarketSmart is a good offering that they might want to consider implementing in their operation, they trust us. Why
Right.
do they trust us? Because MarketSmart has been providing the fundraising report card to them, possibly for free, and they get value out of it.
Sure.
So that offer is part of our sales process, to be perfectly frank.
Yes, yes.
And I developed it because as a board member and as my friends are board members, and as I learned about fundraising from fundraisers and leaders in the field, I found that there really isn't a metrics analyzer and visualization platform that's unbelievably simple to use and easy to convey reporting to the powers that be and the rest of the staff. So I developed it and I just made it free, and now we have tens of thousands of users, and people are very grateful because what they used to spend hours or sometimes even days or weeks crunching numbers to prepare, they can just do it in seconds or minutes and be ready for the board meeting that's going to be the next day. And they can spend more time with their donors instead of working on Excel sheets and PowerPoints.
Love that. Love that. What are some of the common pitfalls you see nonprofits making when trying to cultivate major donors?
Well, there's two big ones. One is missing the fact that there are really three components to why someone will make a major gift. And you can't ignore them, or the gift you get will either be much smaller or you won't get a gift at all. So they are understanding someone's life history, their life story, and how the organization, institution, cause entwines with that life story. There's got to be an intersection. And one of the things it just drives me crazy is seeing people targeted because they have wealth and maybe they went to the university, but that's not enough. The fundraiser and the donor need to understand where is the intersection of their life story, their hero story, their heroic autobiographical story, and how they see themselves in it. You have to understand that, and you have to help them understand it, because there's so many stories I've heard of major donors giving, and then someone finally asks, why did you do that? and then they go and pull out an old picture of them with a professor that changed their life or something, and they're like, oh, I wish I knew that at the beginning of the process. So that's number one of three. And then I'll get to the second big error that I think happens. But the number two component is values. And that's a big one today because people are seeing really bright and clear that the values of an institution they once beloved actually don't align with theirs. I can just think off the top of my head of like Harvard and all the Jewish alumni, and many Ivy League schools.
Sure.
If the values of the organization and institution are misaligned with that of the prospective donor, it won't work out, even if the life story intersection exists. And then number three is a desire for all of us, really. We're tribal creatures. So there's a desire for major donors to belong, meaning they feel part of a community, or sometimes belonging can be done from afar because you just feel connected because you funded that scholarship that young lady was the beneficiary of, and you got a scholarship. So there's that connection with that future generation, which gives you a tribal sense of these are my people.
Yeah.
And I'm going to help them. So to summarize that first, not one of two, is that in engaging with supporters, you've got to be, and I know we all have call reports and all this stuff from donor discovery that we're supposed to collect, but I'm trying to super simplify it, is that you've got to understand the intersection of their life story, their values, and their desire for a sense of belonging. And if you can, there's millions of questions that come from those, but if you can understand those categories, but more importantly, help the supporter understand how this fits in their life so that they can find meaning in their life through sharing, then everything becomes a lot easier. But you've got to stay squarely focused on their story and their needs. So that's
good.
number one. You ready for the
Pitfall
second one?
Number one. Yeah, love that. So good.
Okay. So the second one, and this is an invention of mine that my attorney said I have to like trademark it, and we did, but I don't know what it really means. I don't care about that. I'll just tell you what it is, and I'm going to implore everybody to consider this. Okay.
Please.
Supporters, especially major donors and legacy donors, prospects, maybe they haven't given yet at that level. Most of us don't know how to give. And we need roadmaps. That's the phrase I've assigned to it. I love the word roadmap. They need a yellow brick road. They need a pathway to the Wizard of Oz.
Right.
Most wealthy people in America are first generation wealthy. Most people like me didn't have money and didn't have parents that taught us how to give. I didn't hobnob at a country club and go to galas. I don't know. You could even see it way back when. You may remember Oprah made a big splash by giving everyone in her audience Toyotas.
I remember. New car.
She felt terribly empty after doing that. At first, she was elated, but very soon she realized, well, this isn't how to do philanthropy. It wasn't until she met Nelson Mandela and he taught her about how she can build schools in Africa that she really understood, because there's a big difference between just giving everybody transactionally who you don't know and have no intersectionality or share values, and with then giving schools and education to people in Africa. So a lot of us don't know how to give. And what we desperately need is something that the financial sector, the best wealth planners, financial planners, wealth managers, family offices that are already working with the wealthy people, they know this and crack the code on it, and the best in class do it. But fundraisers don't. And what I mean by do it, what they do is when they meet with someone, they don't try and sell them or ask them to give them all the money and, oh, don't worry about it, I'll manage it. No. They say, you know what? Let me lay out a roadmap for your deeper exploration and understanding of how we work.
Love
And
that.
if it works for you, I would love to go on this journey with you, but don't worry, you don't have to transfer any money until you feel that it's right. And that might be never. But if you don't mind, now that I listened to your story, your values, your, all that, now that I've
Community.
gotten to know you, I would love to go to work on your behalf for free to create a roadmap for your deeper exploration. Now, let me change this for a fundraiser. Imagine saying to a wealthy donor and meeting them at the football game or something, and afterwards you're having a nice chit chat. Well, you might be convinced or told to solicit them and say, hey, how about a $10,000 donation? Before the game ends. And what I'm saying is, don't ask, and I have a chapter in my book that's titled this, don't ask, offer. See, so hold the ask until, frankly, the donor asks themselves. You want people to self-solicit. So what you do is you offer them, instead of asking them for money, you offer them an opportunity to get a roadmap from you, the fundraising facilitator.
Right.
That's right-sized for them based on what they told you. They said that they're not interested in scholarships. They're interested in the sports. So now you know that, and that, okay, I understand. I'm going to put on this roadmap a meeting between you and the head coach, and you and the scholar, the sports leadership and program staff, right? And then you share that roadmap with them and ask them, how do you want to revise it? Well, usually what they say, the people who've taken my advice on this tell me, is they'll say, well, I'm going to be away. I'll be in Europe for the next 3 months. So that's not going to work, but let's change it. But I want to get this gift done before Christmas, they might say. Now you know when you're going to ask them. In fact, they know, because it's in the roadmap, when they're going to ask themselves. So in sum, and you've been very patient, but number 2 recommendation is don't ask, offer. And one of those offers should be a roadmap. What happens if you offer roadmaps instead of asking for money is you end up with reducing the time to close by about 2/3 from what I've seen, and increasing the size of the gift by about 400%.
Wow. Good stuff, Greg. I love it. I love the ideas, and I love your passion both. So, as an entrepreneur, almost 20 years with your business, look back on maybe one or maybe some of the valuable lessons that you've learned working in the fundraising space, helping your clients raise lots of money.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you that one of the biggest mistakes I've made and continue to make, to be perfectly honest, is that it's very hard for me to get outside of my own passion and perspective. My staff liken it to a religion. I have my belief system about how people like me want to give major gifts. because I'm in the circles. I hear my friends talk about how they were approached and treated and how they've decided not to give, or they decide to keep pouring money into their donor advised fund because they want to give,
Right.
but they don't like the value equation in the current experience. So the competition for most organizations and institutions isn't other organizations and institutions, but it's the foundations and donor advised funds who are providing a more valuable engagement experience that donors prefer. Uh, the mistake I make is that I get so frustrated and I want to see change because I believe in philanthropy and I love this sector and I love the people that I work with. And it kills me to see staff get hammered to behave transactionally and transactionally, supposedly relationally, when it's all not quite real. And I get frustrated, and for all those who know me who are listening to this, they may have even experienced it, where it's like, Greg, you've got to drop the religiosity that you have towards your personal cause of changing how people engage with major donors, because you don't know what everybody's dealing with the board or their leadership or whatever problems that are happening internally. It's not so easy to just open up my book and say, we're going to do it that way.
Yeah.
So it's still a problem. I'll be really honest. I don't know what to do about it because I am who I am and I have my beliefs, but I have to be a little bit more empathetic, I think, is to our own customers. So as much as I'm telling you throughout this whole podcast of what fundraisers need to do for donors, I have an issue where I need to be more empathetic and engaging and trustful, for the people in the sector. And that's my biggest mistake, I would say. And it's ongoing and I'm working on it. This has been good therapy. Thank you for listening.
Oh, I love it. And thank you for your authenticity. That's what it's all about. So technology, artificial intelligence, AI, right? Everywhere we turn. Here you are, you've got a technology-based company. What are your thoughts on AI, specifically, obviously, around fundraising? How is this going to help? Are there concerns perhaps you have? How are you thinking about that right now?
Well, I mean, we're working it into everything that we do. It was in 2014. It wasn't too long ago. I dug up a paper I wrote for my team, my product team and engineers. And I pivoted the company to help charities in 2011. In 2014, I became Mr. AI. I'm going to research everything I can about AI. This is 10 years ago. And I just thought, oh, this is big. This is big. I can't wait till it gets here. It's going to probably be after I die, but blah, blah, blah. Well, then ChatGPT comes out and it's like, boom, just explosion. And we're like, oh my God, it's here.
Yeah.
Right? But there's a big difference. Like AI is a very big umbrella statement. And there's a lot that's incorporated in that umbrella. And we have to recognize that, first of all, most of what's happening in AI right now are really toys. Yes, powerful toys that can write things and create graphs and very powerful. But you have to then put the toys together to create some kind of outcome that delivers value. We're not really at that stage yet. We're still very early, and I'm old enough to remember the early stages of the internet and first using dial up and it sounded like a fax machine, and then we get Netscape, and it was slow, very slow. This is happening much faster,
Right.
but we're still at this early stage where it's kind of like, what was it called? Yahoo or Errol's and AOL. It's funny, the
Oh, yeah.
person across the street from me worked for AOL, was one of the early people in there, so
Yeah.
made a lot of money. But I think that people already understand that it's not quite there, and everybody who's running around saying we're using AI, it's it's a feature, it's not a benefit. So that's nice. But tell me, how is my life really going to improve because of the AI? That's what people really want to know.
Right. And specifically, again, in fundraising, like what's this in our world? Where do you see it going, or where are you seeing it? No doubt we're in the very early stages, but where do you see this making an impact?
Well, a few ways, at least, and speaking specifically for us,
Please.
in the fundraising report card, we're rebuilding it right now. It'll launch probably in February of 2025. And we're adding in AI for NLP, so people can ask it questions about their metrics and their data. The challenge with that is that there's a lot of myths, orthodoxies, traditions, and falsehoods out there. So the internet might not be the best place to get the answers,
Okay.
and then let that spew out to our users. So yes, are we including it? Yes. Do we have to be careful? Absolutely. So another feature we're adding into this is a collaborative tool to help make the fundraising report card. And again, it's free. So I guess I'm not scared of telling you this because I don't see any competitors coming and developing it to give it away for free like me. But the idea of adding collaboration tools so that everybody, including the fundraising consultant, the board member, the staff who are on can write down their thoughts about what they're seeing with these charts. And then the machine can learn for that specific institution what it really means, rather than what a cookie cutter internet scraping NLP will then say, this is what you should do. This becomes institution specific, and it becomes a institutional knowledge core database of the historical nature of your fundraising operation. So that's one thing. The other is with MarketSmart's tool, which I don't want to turn this into a sales thing, but what we do is we automate engagement, one-to-one engagement between a fundraiser or leadership and supporters to help the supporters lean into the fundraising process, or I should say the giving and sharing process, and either raise their hands saying, I'm ready to meet with you now, and I want your roadmap. Or they'll not just raise their hands, they'll actually set an appointment right onto the fundraiser's calendar. So what we've been doing for pretty much since 2014, when I started delving into this, is creating the ultimate algorithm for understanding donor and supporter engagement so that we can prioritize who's ready for outreach based on what they say in surveys, what they sort of say through their digital body language, and where they're clicking on an institution's website, and the
Right.
frequency of it and recency of it. And we're combining that to create a prioritization algorithm that is really, I feel selfishly, is second to none, because when it says that they're ripe and they want to outreach, a lot of times before you even pick up the phone, you might notice that they already set an appointment to meet with you.
Right.
So
Right.
that
Right. Right.
algorithm and its learning capability over time to understand what emails and what messages and what words, what subject lines, what content that you're offering in the emails. And I'll tell you the content that doesn't work, especially if you're hoping to get major gifts and legacy gifts. The thing that generally, especially with major gifts, the thing that works the worst is to ask people for money transactionally through email.
Right.
So instead, if you provide value, it helps people move themselves forward through their own personal consideration continuum until the timing is right for them and they have that liquidity event, or they inherit some money, or they fall down and realize life is getting shorter. I mean, the timing aspect is something that you just can't get through predictive analytics traditionally and wealth screening. So it
Right.
doesn't matter how wealthy they are, which used to be the big point. What matters is engagement and their engagement score, because that's the truth serum. That's where they're really telling you that they're ready, they're interested, and they need facilitation, not solicitation. And they want to develop. It's funny, we call it development. Not a lot of people know why, but they want to develop a gift that, and they want to work with you to advance through the process of development until, and that's why they call it advancement, at least according to me. So they want to develop a gift and they want you to help them advance through the roadmap process so that they can share.
Love it. Love it. Good stuff. Maybe last question. I was reading something you wrote recently about the donor story, and so you were talking about this. This was one of the three elements that as fundraisers we need to be thinking about. Talk a little bit more about that. You outlined, I think there were 5 or 6 factors that are important to understand, and help me and the listeners sort of fill in the blanks. If we want to collect that donor story, what are the key elements?
Yeah, so it all comes down to engagement, helping people move themselves forward. And I want to punctuate that, because the way I try and talk, and of course, this is my religion, so to speak, right? For those who don't like it, but the way I speak, I prefer to hear fundraisers speak in these terms, is that we want to help supporters move themselves forward. We want to help them self-qualify and self-prioritize desire for further, deeper engagement and understanding and facilitation. These kinds of words, I've sat in meetings where people talk about targeting and borderline extracting, this is not, and then they in the same sentence they say we need to build relationships. Well, you don't build relationships with anybody by targeting and extracting, and you build it by understanding where they are,
Right.
understanding where they want to go, and helping them get there. So the blog post I wrote was really a rehash of a lot of Dr. Russell James' work, which we've been engaged with him since 2000, I think it was 12, before he really burst on the scene, is that you have to recognize that the giving experience is a heroic donor story that they want to tell themselves. And it's an episode, kind of like a movie or an episode in a TV show, that has a beginning and an end and a middle, that begins with a recognition of who they are. I mean, going back to the history of their story, their values, and their desire or sense of belonging. And then there's a need for an inciting incident from a guide, a
Right.
mentor, right? And everybody, or he uses the famous story from Star Wars with Luke Skywalker is on the planet and it's a desert planet, and they see the lady pop out of the computer and, the R2D2, and she says, "Come with me, we have to save the universe." And Obi-Wan says, "This is the inciting incident. We have to go save the universe." And he says, "I'm not going anywhere. I'm a farmer. I got things to do." What? Which is how most donors act when we first make outreach.
Right.
We're not ready. So you need an inciting incident. The inciting incident, frankly, was that Luke Skywalker's aunt and uncle, then his family, were killed, and he had nothing left. And he said, "There's nothing left for me on this planet. Now I'm ready. I want to go with you to fight Darth Vader." But it doesn't end there. That's the decision to go forward. And frankly, my inciting incident is offering the roadmap.
Right.
So you offer that roadmap, the inciting incident happens. Why are they accepting the roadmap? Is because they want to gain a victory to enhance their telling of themselves, or publicly, their life hero story. Even if they are an anonymous donor, they want to look themselves in the mirror and say, "I was a good person." And this harkens back to A Christmas Carol with Ebenezer Scrooge. I mean, what made him change and become charitable was when he saw his own grave that said he died a miser, unloved and lonely, or something like
Right.
that. Right? Nobody wants that. So what you're really offering is you're not asking, you're offering a roadmap for an engagement experience that'll deliver value that far exceeds the amount of the gift, which is something eternal, which is a life story episode of victory that enhances your identity. Now, to answer your question finally, you've been very patient. Thanks for letting me talk so much. The big problem for the sector, I believe, is that people don't know when to reach out and what to say. They know they're wealthy. They know they're past alums or donors or whatever it is, or volunteers, but they don't know when and what to say. So as part of our software and system, there are 5 components to understanding when to make outreach and what to say. And they are these. I call it the prioritization pentagon, by the way, because it's 5 components. You really only need 4, though, in order to say this person's ready for outreach. So the first one is timing. You need to know that they are ready for your outreach and they want you to call, pretty much. Which, again, I don't want to get too deep into it, but that's what our system collects from the donors. So it's a donor-driven invitation, essentially, from the donor, either by their click habits or their survey verbatims. So you need to know the timing. If you know when people want to talk to you and you make outreach when they want to talk to you, guess what? They're going to call you back or accept your outreach. But then you can still fumble the ball. So you need to understand their reason for wanting you to reach out to them. Why do they care? So that gets back to their story. What is the intersection? What are their values, and what's their desire for a sense of belonging? That's Number 3 is they have to be engaged in some way. And that could be reading emails, clicking on videos, attending a football game, going to a symposium, watching a researcher talk about something. They have to be engaged in some way. And that's what drives me crazy, is to hear some people say, "Well, that person is rich and they're disengaged, but go call them anyway." And they assign them to a caseload. It's like, go get them. And it's like, and then 6 months later, they're like, "Did you ever meet with that person?" "No, they never return my calls." Of course, because the timing isn't right. You're not sure they have a reason, and they're not necessarily engaged. So number 4 is permission. We are in an opt-in society. People prefer to give permission, and they expect that you're going to ask permission before you either ask them for money, start cultivating them, or whatever else it is. I, as a major donor, am not, and I don't mean to create arguments here, but I'm not exactly fond of wealth screening and the amount of information and, frankly, disinformation that those systems have about me, where one I saw said, ask me for a $50,000 gift. I'm like, who? What charity? Like, what? I mean, if it doesn't resonate, you can't ask me. So I would prefer more permission, and that's something that we gain through our system, is we ask for permission to engage further and further and deeper. The fifth component is capacity.
Right.
Capacity. I mean, you don't want to send highly skilled staff who are paid reasonably well on wild goose chases to go meet with people who can't make a substantial impact. We would love to do that if money was no object, but we have to steward past donor dollars properly.
Right.
And that means don't send everybody out to meet with every donor. You can really only afford to give a VIP red carpet experience to the people with the greatest capacity and ability to make the greatest gifts. So you do need to know capacity, but frankly, you can learn that from donors, and it's not from big data. The way we capture it is through engagement, and we ask the supporters and donors, because it could be non-donors who will tell you. We ask them where they are in their consideration process for considering maybe giving assets. People who are poor do not have assets to give, whether it's real estate, donor advised fund, qualified charitable distribution from their IRA, stocks, anything else, business interest, right? So the idea is to engage with people to determine capacity through gaining permission, building trust, and monitor. Because if the person clicks to give a qualified charitable distribution from their IRA and they download the form, I would bet that person's timing is right, and the reason, and they're engaged, and they may even have granted permission in a previous survey or email.
Sure.
That's a person you want to reach out to. So that's the prioritization pentagon. I hope it wasn't too verbose and it made sense.
It's great, Greg. Wow, lots of good wisdom. And thanks so much for being part of this today and sharing a little bit about your story and your business and all the knowledge and wisdom you have about fundraising. Big thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Awesome.
Now I don't have to go to a psychotherapy.
I love it. All right. Well, with that, we'll wrap it up for this episode and see you back here again soon.